This is the PCCI pod, and you're listening to obviously the PCCI pod. Duh.
That's four in a row. Very good. They're going to blow next.
The prodigal son turned Messiah gets his second 100 in successive.
India have won in dramatic style. The whole of Bengal are on their feet.
Diego! Not that important. He's gone the next ball. The dream has diminished for Carlos Brathwaite. Unbelievable scenes here at the Bodwin.
Welcome, folks, to the latest episode of PCCI. Before we were planning this episode, we had a different plan for this episode, but then something huge happened, which was,
It's a big A.
yeah, it was a biggie, but it was on expected lines also. I don't know, was it on expected lines? Anyway, so before we start the main portion of the pod, let us quickly talk about the fact that MS Dhoni has announced that he's retiring from one-day internationals and T20s as well, right? So all kind of international cricket now. And
Yes,
in fact,
1929 hours के बाद से you can consider him retired.
and so he did this by putting a post on Instagram, which I want to discuss with you guys because he put this. I don't know if you guys have seen that post, but I saw that post. So it's a post of, it's like a screensaver where pictures of his career happen. और पीछे वो गाना बज रहा है, मैं पल दो पल का शायर हूँ, पल दो पल मेरी कहानी है, right? Which is okay. Which is great. It's different and it's so much like Dhoni. If you can, Taran
हाँ,
Dhoni
yeah,
निकल रहा है.
yeah.
It's all
फकीरी
like
है उसमें.
because like compared to Sachin, जिसको मतलब again with all due respect उसको एक सीरीज चाहिए था and you
Yeah,
know
सचिन बहुत मतलब थोड़ा क्या बोलते हैं उसको मतलब नार्सिसिज्म थोड़ा दिखता है उसमें.
narcissism or he wanted to make sure that he can wear the helmet in the back also.
वही yeah.
So, but in Dhoni's case, Dhoni just went up and announced. And the thing is that I think they've left for UAE, right? Yesterday.
They are already in the UAE.
They
They left yesterday.
they posted a
They left
flight.
yesterday and then he announced. So he's not even in India, so that journalists उसके घर के आसपास इकट्ठा भीड़ भी नहीं करेंगे. So ये सब I think ये सब सोचिए किया. But वो जो कोलाज था ना, वो जो पिक्चर्स का सीरीज था ना, उस पिक्चर की सीरीज में उसने वो पिक्चर भी डाली जिसमें वो बांग्लादेश वाले मैच में 0 पे आउट होके जा रहा है और उसके घर को जला रहे हैं, उसके पोस्टर्स जला रहे हैं फैंस. ये फोटो भी डाली उसने, पता?
उसने नहीं मतलब आई एम प्रीटी श्योर ये उसके एजेंट या
PR
पीआर
agency था.
हाँ.
they would have
But उसने अप्रूव तो किया होगा. हाँ.
एग्जैक्टली उसका क्रिएटिव डिसीजन तो रहा हो, तो क्यों किया होगा उसने ऐसा? आई एम थिंकिंग
मतलब just this was the part of the journey और क्या रीजन हो सकता है I don't know.
यूजुअली आई डोंट थिंक कि जो ऐसे क्रिकेटर्स स्पेशली ऐसे मोमेंट पे जब वो रिटायर होने वाले होते होंगे तो ऐसी चीजें याद करना चाहते होंगे विच आई एम श्योर हैव बीन लाइक
हाँ तो वही उसी हाँ यू आर राइट. और उसी के मतलब उसी लाइंस पे मुझे ये भी लग रहा था कि व्हाई आर पीपल सो फैसिनेटेड बाय द फैक्ट कि वो अपने पहले मैच में भी एक बॉल खेल के रन आउट हो गया था और फिर फाइनल में मतलब व्हाई आर यू डूइंग दिस एट दिस मोमेंट.
हाँ मतलब उसका कोई पॉइंट नहीं है उस चीज का.
वो वही मैच था ना, बांग्लादेश के साथ हार गए थे हम लोग जो सुनामी के टाइम पे.
सुनामी के बाद, राइट? जस्ट बाद
उसी हफ्ते में था, आगे पीछे.
सो
But yeah, this was expected, along expected
it
lines.
was expected, but now that you like we have time and now that it's final, Aditya, I'll start with you. Retrospectively, thoughts on this career of Dhoni, that is.
Yeah, I think between, say, the time he debuted till up to 2015-16, exceptional career. Right, to those 11 years, I think some careers are much shorter, but I think the impact that it had on Indian cricket, I think significant. White ball cricket, particularly. I wouldn't say that overall, even as a test captain or as a test batsman per se, I don't think we've had better careers in test cricket, but I think the overall impact, one day cricket, significant impact on Indian cricket. But yeah, it ended probably not the way it should have in the last few years. We could see that the career was being stretched way beyond its shelf life. So last 3 years at least.
Which is right, but Dhoni to me does not seem the kind of player who would stretch something needlessly. I don't really still understand. I mean, he believed that he can still do well. That's why sports.
हाँ या क्योंकि just the way like he didn't really come in with a मतलब ऐसा कुछ उसका वो भी नहीं था कि watch out for this kid जो सचिन या द्रविड़ या कोहली के लिए होता था. And Harsha Bhogle always said, right, he'll just one day just randomly announce that he's going to go and he's going to
हर्षा
succeed.
एक्चुअली हर्षा भोगले का एक बहुत अच्छा पीस है आपके मतलब ऐसा हर्षा भोगले ने पीस लिखा था जिसमें he said that what like and it's a long piece and maybe we can link it to our show notes but he ended it with saying कि what Dhoni achieved though goes way beyond the numbers he produced. He told young Indians in small towns that they could conquer the world. To them, he was the beacon, he was the dream that maybe they could achieve too. He showed the way. It is a substantial and wonderful thing in life to do. When he finishes there, I don't think we will know too much about him though. So the whole piece is about how he knows nothing. Like
Mhm.
out of all the players that he has interacted with, he knows the least about Dhoni.
Hmm.
That has been the case for anybody who has met him and known him. Having said that, he's probably the only player out who has a biopic. Azhar वाले biopic को मैं biopic नहीं count करता.
That is, huh.
And even this is also
But
like very
again,
highly dramatized, but still.
yeah, he produced it himself. So
Dhoni produced it himself. मुझे नहीं पता.
Yes, yes.
yeah, उसकी company है one of the producers.
Riti Sports.
I don't know, but कुछ तो maybe they just created another company just for production purposes. But बाकी yeah, I don't think well, yeah, it's a separate discussion. I think बाकी किसी देख अब ऐसे बन तो कोहली पे भी सकती है और एक दिन बनेगी भी 50-500
हाँ
करोड़
अब
कमाएगी भी.
तो शायद बनेगी बट इससे पहले धोनी से पहले वो नहीं था राइट इनफैक्ट
See,
सचिन की जिसको बायोपिक बोलने में भी शर्म आती है मुझे बट
Sachin का the documentary था. It wasn't
हाँ.
really
A Billion Dreams.
it was a documentary, right?
Yeah.
It's not really a
सचिन
biopic.
यार मुझे
जब मैं
अगेन
10 साल का था,
धोनी
तब
की
कपिल
बात
देव ने
करनी
तो
चाहिए आज लेकिन सचिन मुझे थोड़ा the problem with Sachin is the only thing he knew was how to bat. I mean how to play cricket.
Sachin, see the
Other than
problem
that,
again.
he's a bit of उसको it's almost like वो ये ना कि he doesn't know what's going on. Like,
तुम लोगों ने
सचिन के साथ वो प्रॉब्लम है ना आईआईटी जेई वाले बच्चे का जो
हाँ
प्रॉब्लम है
हाँ वही
कि 7वीं 8वीं से उसको तुमने
बस उसकी एक
ट्यूटोरियल्स
ही
में लगा दिया
हम्म,
तो उसका बाकी कोई भी ऐसा पर्सनालिटी डेवलपमेंट का कोई कंसेप्ट था ही नहीं and then he was thrust straight into the Indian team and there is nothing in between so it's also partly not just his problem
yeah.
but
And I mean imagine
you
Sachin
see
was,
that with Messi also. So Messi isn't really a great personality per se. Messi
हाँ
is a
हाँ
very uninspiring
अरे हाँ even मतलब
personality in general outside of the
I
football
mean in
field.
a way you can say the same about Dhoni also right I mean from what we know of Dhoni outside of cricket he doesn't do anything
No,
like
but
he
yeah, no, but
but
he
with
at least
Dhoni,
has like
it's
a एक sense of humor दिखता है उसका and मतलब this even in some press conferences वो थोड़ा सा like I would imagine if you didn't know who these guys were in real life and if you just went into a coffee shop or a bar you would enjoy talking to Dhoni more than Sachin.
true because with Dhoni, it feels like okay, he is trying to maintain this sense of mystery. Not per se, not mystery per se, but he prefers it that way
I think
in some ways.
that's him you
Yeah,
cannot
but yeah, he's
maintain an
reserved like he's a
artificial
reserved personality. वो मतलब show off नहीं करता है ज़्यादा.
If I was ever, say, a cricketer of that stature, I would prefer it to be the Dhoni way and not the Sachin way, the way it ended.
Or the Kohli
So,
way where he's going. मतलब
yeah, so it does look that way. So that is something I agree.
Yeah.
And it's probably not a lack of personality, but just not wanting to be that way.
he just there is something about his Dhoni's demeanor which I found really interesting was that even in victories in cricket and even like life outside of cricket and it just felt like he didn't care like he didn't care about the consequences he just
Yeah.
cared about going through
The process,
the process
which
I
he
know it
said,
sounds very
right? Which he
cliche
said so many
yeah
times. Yeah.
but like even if you look at that 2011 World Cup that moment everyone around him is visibly like emotional, but you don't see that in him.
Yeah, yeah. He
And
even just took the trophy, just handed it to the players, and went to the side.
I think the most I've
He
seen him
let
react
that
is,
moment be for Tendulkar almost.
I think 2007 was probably his most expressive after a result. I don't think Champions Trophy.
2013, right? 2013
seven.
CT.
नहीं, also the seven,
Oh
the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
जोगिंदर शर्मा
Hmm,
moment, टी शर्ट उतार
yeah,
के
yeah.
किसी बच्चे को देना और वो सब. And also
2013 maybe like
13
he was
was,
dancing almost.
and 13 had some other significance because 13 had the backdrop of all the IPL scandal and all the CSK Rajasthan Royals thing, and that has just broken out a week before the
Yeah.
Champions Trophy. So 13 meant a lot more in that sense because it was also a team which didn't have Yuvraj and Sachin. It's the
Hmm.
first major tournament for the next lot
Yeah.
where Kohli now is the leading batsman.
Hmm.
So Dhoni and Raina was for the first time, that was the engine room of your batting in some ways,
Yeah.
which was different to 2011 because 2011 almost had a sense of destiny to it, right? It was the
Yeah. First home World
it
Cup.
wasn't
No,
really
no.
Dhoni's team in that sense.
Hmm.
2011 was very much the 2003 side with
Yeah.
the luxury of playing at home and
Hmm. Well, luxury थी लेकिन उस समय तक no home team had won the World Cup ever.
Sri Lanka
नहीं ना,
in
वो
a
भी
way.
होम नहीं, वो भी like
Home,
they won
हाँ,
in like Pakistan, right? In the
Yeah.
end.
technically a home World Cup in some sense.
By the way, Rana also retired.
Um, and with like,
Rana is only 33 by the way, na? 33 or 34 ही है वो. He's
हाँ,
not.
but he knows he's not gonna get back. So I think he'll
Yeah,
focus on IPL, and as long as he has
yeah. Of
IPL,
course. Yeah.
और
but
उसके बाद
I'd
I think
rather have it this way than the way say Yuvraj's career ended.
अभी सुना तुम लोगों ने युवराज का न्यूज़?
नहीं
पंजाब
अभी क्या हुआ?
के स्पोर्ट्स में से ऐसे किसी ने युवराज से रिक्वेस्ट किया कि वो वापस आके रणजी टीम ज्वाइन करे, ऐसा कुछ. They want him to play again, ऐसा कोई न्यूज़. आई होप
But
मेरा
Okay,
why?
what,
सपना नहीं था. आई रियली
what
लाइक, कभी
नहीं,
कभी
but
रात में
why?
मुझे सपना
Like,
आता है. Because they need, I don't know, I don't really know, they need his experience or something.
what is in it for the cricketer though? Like I
yeah,
don't really see anything that motivates someone. Although Ajay
हाँ,
Jadeja did it towards the end of his career, so played for Haryana. But Ajay Jadeja ke case mein he had other stuff
he had to
to
prove
prove
something.
yeah,
something. But with Yuvraj's case, I don't see anything.
yeah,
With Dhoni, the sad part for me was the way it ended. Not the way in which it was announced and stuff, but the way the career ended per se.
yeah. It
Not
felt
not just the 20,
elongated
not just the
unnecessarily.
semi final, but the entire year and a half, couple of years leading up to that World Cup felt like such a drag. Like post 2015, you could see that it's not the same man now.
Yeah,
He doesn't have the same finishing abilities,
yeah,
and partly if you had a more a team management which had more sense and didn't fall for the personality cult, they would probably have taken out more out of Dhoni in those couple of years. Like, for example, say to identify the fact that Dhoni was no longer a finisher and then trust him into the role of a number four. That would have been completely all right for me in that entire tournament. If
yeah,
that was that was the way they were going ahead and they were looking at Dhoni being the only option as a wicketkeeper in that World Cup, slotting him in at number four for a good period of a year and a half leading up to the World Cup would have made some sense.
yeah,
But it required someone who is not Ravi Shastri or Virat Kohli
yeah.
because both of them seem to have basically been fanboys in the dressing rooms.
Exactly. हाँ कि ये
I
करे
don't
मतलब
see
yeah.
them, yeah, see them talking to say for example even Sachin in the 2007 World Cup we flopped.
Hmm.
Probably it was a wrong decision. But at least someone like a Greg Chappell and Rahul Dravid could tell Sachin to say to bat at number four so that they could slot in a Uthap. It didn't work out. That's all right.
Yeah,
But with Dhoni, it was so very obvious that he wasn't being able to finish off games the same way.
yeah,
The
We were
thing,
almost preparing a team strategy around a player who was not in the team. So we were looking at a 2011 player and devising team strategies around him rather than what they had in hand.
the thing with him is that, or the thing with, and we've talked about this as like Indian management agar pura ho, if it is all Indian management, then this ends up happening, right? Where you end up having like like looking after like greats. Basically, you give more, and we you can say that the Greg Chappell experiment failed, and this is a whole different discussion. But I don't completely agree with that. I think Greg Chappell is given much less credit than he was due for Indian cricket. I think had it not been for the fact that Indians in general are emotional, and that whole Ganguly stupidity where he clearly did not deserve a place in the team, and yet
Yeah.
everyone, including the people and politicians, like started, had it not been for that, I think Greg Chappell could have, I think it would have been, if he had been given a longer run, it would have been much better. 2007 World Cup actually, um, and we'll talk about this, but 2007 World Cup signed off, like ended Greg Chappell's tenure
Yeah.
as coach. I think
Even
2007
इरफान
World Cup
पठान
is not an
इवन पठान
example.
said right he's मतलब लोग बोलते हैं ना कि like पठान का career waste कर दिया but even इरफान पठान himself said that it wasn't like that we were trying something and it
Yeah,
didn't work out so
and sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. In fact, we like, and we've talked about this in our pod, right? Indian cricket, especially after Kohli has taken over, has become more conservative in their approach. Like we don't play like England. England is redefining cricket. In India is not redefining cricket. And during that brief period of 2 years when Greg Chappell was the coach, was the only time where we were looking at every player and trying to figure out how we can get the maximum utility from that player.
In fact, even from an absolute results perspective, if you look at either side of that 2007 World Cup, we were not very unsuccessful because we had this extremely long run of successful run chases under Dravid, which was under Greg Chappell. And on the other side of it, I think Chappell actually built a lot of the base for the test successes that followed. So even in 2006, we won in West Indies for the first time in I don't remember how many years, right? 30 years or something. That wasn't really a really bad West Indies side. It was a side with Lara, Chandrapal and co. We almost won a test series in South Africa. We won the first ever test match in South Africa in Joburg. That
yeah
was under Chappell. So a lot of it gets overshadowed because Indian cricket works from this World Cup to World Cup cycle, and rightly so. But apart from that, it gets magnified by the fact that he didn't have a lot of popular support from the
players
senior management. That's all. Even Rahul Dravid, for that matter, doesn't really look like someone who holds a grudge against Chappell.
I don't think everyone. So this is a
Tendulkar
public-private thing,
obviously
right?
does. Tendulkar obviously does.
Because
Reading into
he
what is written.
his problem is almost like Ganguly's problem, where
yeah
it almost becomes about them. And I know that people will like get us on after seeing this, but and I understand that having Tendulkar open the innings has been the most successful thing for the longest time and everything. But in terms of utility, if they felt that he could be more useful at number 4, and maybe he would have ended up with 10 less centuries, would that have? I don't know.
It was
I mean,
also
yeah
it was also not a new experiment in that sense. Tendulkar at 4
had
has
been done.
been tried in the
yeah
past,
I think
99
yeah
and
yeah
03. Not very successfully, I must say. But
in fact I remember some of his innings in remember that series in England where
That was my
Nitro
number
series, yeah,
4.
yeah,
Yeah,
it was yeah, it was
2002.
Nitro series.
He
So
has a
other than
couple
the
of
final,
hundreds at
yeah,
4.
other than final, he was also
Then
matlab,
even final, he didn't bat it. He didn't open in
yeah,
that
yeah,
entire
that's what I'm
tournament.
saying. Other than the final, he didn't fail at 4 or 5. I'm saying.
So
Uh,
starting from then, I think till the Netherlands game in the 2003 World Cup, he didn't open. The first time he opened was, I think, in the opening game of the World Cup. तभी गांगुली को 4 कराया था. And there is this famously there is this incident that it seems Tendulkar wanted to open and didn't give
तेरा कुत्ता गांगुली fan है क्या?
John Wright a choice, and John Wright came up with this idea that they'll ask the entire squad to put in their choice of opening pairs. So it seems they received 14 such chits.
Yeah.
13 of them were Tendulkar Sehwag. There was one Ganguly Tendulkar.
who was that?
Obviously Ganguly.
So this is the thing, and I think Chappell के साथ ये है कि a lot of, like, I think even players like Sehwag and Yuvraj and Dhoni might have positive feelings toward Chappell, but you cannot say it in public because it's
And they
just
can't override Ganguly,
politics of
right?
it
Yeah,
is
yeah,
just
yeah,
bad.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
In fact,
Um,
all of them, all
mhm.
of those who were identified by Ganguly, rightly, Ganguly deserves credit for the reason that he stuck with them. But beyond that, I think so if you look at Dhoni, Yuvraj as an example, their careers as one day cricketers actually really blossomed and matured under Chappell and Dravid. You had that entire phase of run chases which happened under
Don't
Dravid, not
I
under
agree?
Ganguly.
Don't you think? Don't you? I mean, again, and so imagine if Yuvraj stayed Yuvraj, Yuvraj's career
Hmm.
stayed Yuvraj's career, but whenever Yuvraj was tried in test matches, instead of Yuvraj, it was Kaif who was given a chance. Because between Yuvraj and Kaif, Yuvraj was first and Kaif was second. So if there was
Yeah.
a test opening, it was always Yuvraj who'd get slotted in,
Hmm.
right? I think, and again, this is all pure speculation, but had
Which
Kaif
is
been
also
given
nicely leading into the
into our
topic of the day.
episode of
Yeah.
today. But had Caf been given many of those, because I think Caf was never a batsman who'd fare well at number seven in an ODI. He
No.
was,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
In fact, the only times he has fared well at number 7 in an ODI was in a test match like situation where there was a
that
rescue operation
Zimbabwe game.
required.
Yeah.
Zimbabwe game,
No,
the
even
Pakistan game that we won, yeah,
2002
we
NatWest.
2002 NatWest to
Yeah.
hai, but apart from that, there is this fourth ODI of that series in Pakistan, 2004,
Yeah.
where we are chasing 290 odd
293.
and Dravid and
He
Kaif
was
had
not a never a like a big finisher.
no,
मतलब
he,
He was
he
not a big hitter. He
हाँ
was
he
not a
wasn't a big
big
hitter.
hitter.
So मतलब he was अब मैं बहुत बड़ा नाम ले रहा हूँ but because the numbers don't back it up, he was kind of Bevan, but he was up till the 40th over.
Huh.
he had biggish strokes, but he was never going
Yeah,
to be the person who will chase down like 15 and over for the last five.
yeah, exactly.
I
He
think he
was
could have had a decent टेस्ट करियर लाइक उसको अगर पुजारा की तरह ट्रीट करते एक पॉइंट के बाद, क्योंकि वनडे टीम में उसकी जगह नहीं थी, विच आई अंडरस्टैंड, बट बिकॉज उसको वनडे टीम में जगह नहीं था, somehow he ended up losing his
in,
spot in the test.
in fact he lost his spot to people like Suresh Raina later on. पहले तो Yuvraj, and then even when Yuvraj was a failure, we went back to Suresh Raina around that phase, right? We have tried a lot of people, and I think the people who probably might have been more successful in that slot were even Badrinath, for example. Badrinath
Oh
was
my
not
god, yes,
really
definitely.
Badrinath was not really a one day cricketer in that sense. Badrinath as a test cricketer would have probably been a good fit, but
He had a decent innings against South Africa, remember? I think it
remember
was his debut.
debut 50
Yeah.
on debut against like a peak stain.
Rocker, हाँ.
Proper,
Yeah.
yeah, proper attack.
So the thing is sometimes certain cricketers get slotted into the wrong format first, and then as a result then they lose out on an entire career.
I feel that, and about CAF, but with that we'll segue into our
Kaif
episode.
का just one last word. I think Kaif even Pujara से ज़्यादा Kaif reminded me of say a Paul Collingwood, like a slightly more talented version of Paul Collingwood in some sense. Paul Collingwood, the Test cricketer.
I think he would have been a very good number 4 or number 5 in test
In
matches.
Collingwood.
No, CAF.
Nick Collingwood
No.
was a reasonably successful Test cricketer, right? Double-handed in Australia and so on.
Yeah.
But like he was still, Collingwood was more util, like he could be
He
because
could bowl.
all those dibly dobblies and all.
Yeah.
ODI में भी उसका जगह था, right?
Hmm.
CAF could have completely focused on test and could have had a decent 10-year career, I think. So I think going back to the question, and I know we started from Dhoni and we ended up in Ganguly bashing, but the question that needs to be asked is players like Yuvraj, Sehwag, Zahir Khan, the players who are being credited as picked by Ganguly, do you really think that they wouldn't have succeeded in making a name for themselves if like,
It's
I mean,
it's also
it's not like, so like सहवाग के बारे में कह सकते हो कि the idea of सहवाग opening in both ODIs and Test was maybe Ganguly's. So maybe that सहवाग I can see like succeeding because of Ganguly. But Yuvraj was a success. Like Yuvraj, for the first 10 odd years in his one day career, he ever fail? Like in the sense for his place and
There was a brief patch towards the end of John Wright's tenure where he failed, but he was not really an out and out failure. But again, that's what I was referring to, right? A lot of these people, their careers actually revived under Greg Chappell. किसी किसी का उल्टा भी हुआ, जैसे इरफान पठान during Greg Chappell's initial part of his tenure, Pathan actually had a decent time. But Yuvraj definitely bloomed under Yuvraj, Chappell and Dravid.
Dhoni. Dhoni's initial career.
Yeah,
Dhoni
yeah.
the run chaser, matlab the finisher.
That move to send him at 3 against
So
Pakistan.
वो तब हुआ. Even say Sehwag and Zahir needed like a push at that point because their careers had started plateauing. And both Sehwag and Zahir, their success, they were not really successful in that 2003 World Cup के बाद का जो phase था. Like by the time we reach Pakistan in 2004, Zahir is now the third or fourth seamer. He is no longer the spearhead of the attack because you are led by Balaji and Irfan Pathan in that phase, right?
Injury
Because the injury ऑस्ट्रेलिया में फर्स्ट टेस्ट में हो गया था गैबा में. Then we played 5-6 test matches where we didn't have Zahir, and even Zahir, the ODI bowler, was not the same at that point. So he required a push from the team management. So he goes back after Greg Chappell's tenure, or towards the latter half of his Greg Chappell's tenure, to the county circuit, and he comes back a better player. And the Zahir we saw between 2007 and 11 was pretty much the fact that a team management was willing to push him harder. And the same was with Sehwag. Sehwag wasn't really like setting the world alight in that phase. Sehwag in South Africa was pushed to bat down the order. If you remember 2007 when we went to South Africa,
Yeah, yeah.
Sehwag in that last test was sent in at number 6 or something because he was struggling against Steyn, and so it wasn't really without reason that Chappell was harsh on these guys. So, but the mere fact that Ganguly was pushed out, and as a result, there was the entire team dynamic around everybody who was given an opportunity by Ganguly, backing Ganguly. It all ended up becoming like one versus the team.
That's what I'm saying. In fact, for a long time, after the 2003 World Cup, Kaif, as I said, kept getting picked in the ODI side when he should have been looked for test team. And the guy we dropped was Dinesh Mongia, who, for whatever limited talent that he had more utility in ODIs than Kaif, I think.
Yes.
Because he could bowl, and as an ODI attacking batsman, he could attack better than Kaif. That's what I feel.
Kaif ka, sadly, I think he also had one of his better test match knocks also came in 2006 in West Indies, where we were
Wasn't it his
saving
I think it was his last test.
Yeah, the last test was 100. His last test innings was 100.
and
And
that
that
was
too
a
in West
crucial
Indies.
inning.
Yeah.
West Indies में वो वाला सीरीज में फर्स्ट टेस्ट इफ यू सी आई थिंक जेरोम टेलर ने 7 विकेट निकाला या ऐसा कुछ तो था, एंड वी कोलैप्स्ड and we were trailing by a big margin, 100 plus से we were trailing, and we were almost struggling to save the test match.
Yeah.
तो कैफ और वसीम जाफर का एक डबल 100 है वहाँ पे.
वसीम जाफर को डबल 100 भी याद है मुझे.
So what if
पे आ रहा है ना,
what if Kaif was picked
एक
more
तो
for
हो गया.
tests?
What if Kaif was
I think it would have been better for Kaif, for the longevity of his career, and would have been better for Indian team in general, especially during the period of 2011 when we suddenly lost a lot of like big like our top
Players, Dravid, Ganguly,
big four,
sab,
basically.
yeah.
And at that stage you would have had a Kaif who had already played like 40-50 odd test matches here and there,
Yeah.
and I think he would have been one of those players who, like almost like Pujara, could play a Rahane type role, not as pretty
Yeah.
as Rahane, but could have played a role like Rahane,
Prettier
and
version.
and it would have given us time. And like
You're
even
right.
now,
I mean, those 4-0 back to back in England and Australia probably would have looked a lot better.
even forget Sachin, Lakshman and Dravid. We for the longest time couldn't replace Ganguly, who retired in 2008.
we bought in Yuvraj, and
We
Yuvraj didn't
tried
succeed.
Suresh Raina.
सुरेश रैना, इमेजिन लाइक सुरेश रैना को टेस्ट में पिक करने का मतलब,
He had a
although
century, but still.
although maybe in the subcontinent you can pick someone like Raina and maybe he will succeed, but in the end, the moment you leave and go to Sena,
Yeah.
people like Raina will have a difficult time. Even people like Yuvraj is a great, like he had great hand-eye coordination for as long as he played.
Not
But
against red ball. I didn't get.
that's what I'm going at.
Hmm.
Basically, there are a few factors that change when you play red ball, right? There are no field restrictions.
Hmm.
There are no bowler restrictions. You cannot, and basically going back to the same thing where Dhoni thrived with these mathematical equations. He knew that this bowler has these many overs,
Yeah.
and this is the field restriction, and in that kind of scenario he thrived because
Yeah.
he could play according to them. When it becomes test matches become difficult because now there are no
Open-ended.
rules. Like now Stain can bowl non-stop 6 overs, 8 overs from one end at you. How long can you let it go? How long can you not make a mistake is a test cricket. Whereas in one day cricket, even if you have a Stain, you cannot have him bowl 8 overs on a trot.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
just
Or
not possible.
or or you can still wait for that weaker fifth bowler to come in, and then you
Or
can
at
pick
some
on
point
him.
you'll have to bowl even Stain with only two people outside the circle.
Outside. Yeah. Yeah.
And that kind of
Yeah.
cuts down on what Stain can do.
Yeah.
So and I mean, so I think that's a what if. So with that, let me just introduce the episode that we plan to do today. The episode that we plan to do today was about cricket what ifs. And by what if we mean that we go back in our cricketing viewing years, so from the 90s onwards, and look at some of the moments that we feel defined how cricket happened after it, and we talk about how it could have been different had it happened some other way. Having said that, because we've been talking a lot about Dhoni, Kaif, and everything, so I'll start with my what if, and then we can talk about yours. My what if is that game against Bangladesh in 2007 World Cup that India lost, and my what if is India somehow ends up winning that game by like a thread, but they win the game. They end up qualifying for the Super 8 and end up going up to the semi-finals of that World Cup and end up losing to Australia in the semi-finals, just like let's say the 2015 World Cup. They end up losing the semi-final and everything stays the same. How would have that changed the cricket since then? In my proposition is that would have changed the cricket in two ways. Number one, World Cups after ODI World Cups after it would have kept on being expanded, or at least stay at 16 teams a tournament, which we all kind of want to happen, right?
Yeah.
People like, and the World Cups wouldn't have shrunk, and that would have meant more games for the so-called associates, the
Yeah.
so-called minnows,
Hmm.
and in the interim 13 years that has been since, we would have seen especially certain teams like Nepal, for example, and even like Ireland and
Yeah.
Afghanistan,
Even Bangladesh themselves.
even Bangladesh with all like they've improved leaps and bounds, I have to
Yeah. Yeah.
say.
They have. They have.
Uh,
Yeah.
but I think we would have seen these teams become more stronger.
Yeah, and you
Um,
see the qualifiers for 2015 or 2019 where West Indies and Bangladesh, no, West Indies and
2019 qualifiers.
yeah, it was. So first of all, we almost had a World Cup without West Indies,
yeah,
and then imagine the same match, but imagine the same match happening in the actual World Cup. So
No, West Indies got in through a dodgy LBW decision
yeah,
in the qualifiers
Ireland missed
for
out. Yeah.
Scotland.
Scotland missed out. Yeah, Scotland missed
And there was no DRS.
Yeah.
West Indies survived and they got into the World Cup. So
yeah,
imagine that. So that is one, and let's talk about that as well. But the second is then because ICC lost a bunch of money or
उसमें वो भी हो गया ना, पाकिस्तान भी बाहर हो गया था
हाँ
2007,
so
so that
a
was
lot of
another,
like advertisers were
वो
like कि
मतलब
क्या ये
मसाला भी छिड़क दिया था, so yeah.
कि क्या fuck up है ये मतलब हमारा तो पैसा बर्बाद हो गया and I think that pushed the sudden plan because there was no plan for T20 World Cup to happen in 2007 before as
Yeah,
far
yeah,
as I
yeah.
remember,
Yeah.
right? It was a plan because they now wanted to make money,
Some additional money. Yeah.
some additional money, and so either I am not saying that 2007 T20 World Cup wouldn't have happened. I mean, it would have happened, but maybe not in 2007. Maybe it would have happened in 2009. So in an interim year, and maybe IPL after the
Would have been
success of
pushed.
2007 World Cup would have been pushed a few years down, and perhaps that would have meant uh, the cricket as is the current England way of and again it depends on a number of permutations and
Yeah, yeah,
combinations.
yeah.
But
See, because what if instead of in 2008 it was 2009 or 10, and then maybe McCullum wouldn't have had that 158 in the first match. I mean, that would
yeah,
have. Yeah.
or maybe I'm saying if
But
it
then
had
I'm pretty sure that would have also meant that RCB has a proper T20 side in the first IPL instead of having Dravid, Kallis,
or
and
not
Sunil Joshi.
actually because
Yeah,
I think in
RCB's best shot came at winning the IPL came in
South Africa
2009, South Africa. So
Yeah.
I think had it not been had we not lost that game against Bangladesh and kicked out of the World Cup, the T20 World Cup, the first T20 World Cup, if it would assuming it would have happened in 2009 or even 2007, but let's say 2009, all the big wigs would have played in that tournament as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Dhoni
Would have
would
probably been the
would have been in the
decent.
team, but wouldn't
Yeah,
have been the captain.
yeah, wouldn't have been the captain. Yeah,
And because we don't have a huge tradition of having wicketkeeper captains or non-proper batsman captains, I think we might not have had Dhoni as a captain. I mean, we would have probably had it at some point, but टेस्ट में तो वो 2014 में रिटायर हो गए राइट 2009 से 2014 में 5 ही साल तो होते हैं तो कितना ही टाइम मिलता तो आई थिंक वी वुड हैव एंडेड अप हैविंग आफ्टर कुंबले वी वुड हैव हैड अ सहवाग एज कैप्टन फॉर अ ईयर
probably.
फ्यू
Yeah.
इयर्स एंड आई डोंट नो
Then
व्हाट
Kohli. Yeah.
पता नहीं कोहली को शायद उतनी जल्दी नहीं बना दो बिटवीन सहवाग एंड कोहली आई डोंट नो शायद तब धोनी होता आई गेस आई एम गेसिंग बट धोनी वुड हैव बीन लाइक
Interim.
a transitional candidate like Kumble,
Yeah.
like Biden.
Yeah.
So my what if is basically this that India, but the so I guess we started talking about it and it all seems, and I don't know how it would have affected our cricket. Sehwag as captain, I don't think he had a lot of like wits about him.
Yeah.
But I also think because of Dhoni's special liking for slower bowlers, we ended up losing
Ashwin
like
and we ended up losing, you're saying. But
losing in
we
the
all,
sense losing out on developing faster bowling talents as has
because the
happened in the past.
current bunch is actually the same bunch that played under Dhoni
yeah.
Yeah.
for a large part of their careers. But the fact that Dhoni somehow had an aversion towards those more erratic
And Sharma
but
would have
quicker
been
bowlers.
completely lost.
Huh.
Yeah.
Ishant Sharma would have been dropped or in and out Agarkar type career for Ishant Sharma.
No, but I'd actually say Ishan Sharma got a longer rope than many others. Like Varun Aaron, for example, Varun Aaron had a lot of potential, but
Yeah. But वो
got
injury
shelved very
होता रहता
quickly.
था. Yeah.
वरुण एरन के आखिरी गेम में उसने हशी मामला का एक बहुत अच्छा बोल्ड निकाला है अ गेम दैट गॉट वॉश्ड आउट एंड ही नेवर प्लेड टेस्ट क्रिकेट अगेन
No, but he
बैंगलोर
also
में
keeps getting injured now.
no he keeps getting injured but I'm talking of Varun Aaron for the first part played under Dhoni also happened to be his Jharkhand captain for coincidentally but Varun Aaron didn't get the same kind of rope that Ishant got for example so
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
Dhoni,
Ishant got
Dhoni had a preference for people who could keep it tight
Yeah.
as
And
opposed
also,
to the
if you, it's almost like a Shoaib Akhtar wala thing, right? If you are playing Varun Aaron as one of your main bowlers in a test match, say in India, where the other team is going to play for 100 overs, bat for 100 overs, it's very difficult. Like, it's like you are one bowler less because I don't expect a bowler like Varun Aaron to be able to bowl more than 15, 16 overs in an innings. So you have
True.
to get the maximum out of him in those 15,
No,
16
but
overs.
that depends on the way you look at Test cricket. So again, for this is where I would give Kohli the credit. Kohli doesn't purely look at their his spacemen as people who will just hold up one end, even if he has a Ashwin and a Jadeja in the side. If you look at the numbers, they have dramatically changed
Of
under
course.
Kohli.
I mean,
Home
again,
numbers, home
Oh yeah,
numbers
yeah,
for
yeah,
quick bowlers.
yeah.
I
He
mean, look at
loves
the
Umesh
he
is
top
loves
average and
averaging.
attacking.
Bangladesh series, right?
Umesh is
There are
averaging
days that he didn't bowl.
22. Yeah, 23, 24. Umesh is averaging since 2016. And this is a good chunk of statistics. It's not like just an aberration of
Yeah,
1 year. So
yeah.
something's changed. Yeah.
Something's changed. I think something that we don't quite take into account, I think, is the Bumrah factor. To have a bowler like Bumrah in your team, I think
बट वो तो ओवरसीज हुआ ना, बुमराह ने घर में तो
घर
कुछ
में तो
खेला ही
खेला ही
नहीं.
नहीं. Yeah.
घर में हाँ, which I agree, but it's a psychological effect also, I think. Even
नहीं,
Shami
उसके
to an extent.
उसके भी पहले there are two series which I look at particularly when it comes to Indian pacers. One is the 2016-17, you know, when England got 4-0 whitewashed. कब था वो? 16 ही था. England and Australia toured back to back, and you had that really good Australian Test series, right?
Yeah, जो पुणे
जो
वाला
brain plate वाला,
हाँ,
brain
yeah.
plate वाला.
उसी में पुणे
That
में हार गए थे ना फर्स्ट
वो
टेस्ट.
दोनों ही सीरीज में we won because our fast bowlers outbowled
Oh yeah,
the opposition.
that was such a big discussion कि पहली बार like it happening the other way around.
Dharamshala में we won on the back of Umesh and Bhuvneshwar actually, because you look at that second innings of Australia where the game is like hardly a 10-run lead or something. Then the first spell में Warner, Smith और Renshaw था शायद से उसमें. First spell में your quick bowlers get the wickets. So I think that's where things started turning around.
Going back to the what if situation though, Aditya, so how do you like take my what if and think things would have been?
One thing's for sure, I think the health of one day cricket and the World Cup in general would have been better. I think that's the biggest ramification of the tournament. Forget everything that happened afterwards in terms of T20 cricket and all that. T20 cricket would have eventually happened. So I think
it was already happening.
It was already
had started.
happening.
Yeah, it had started.
And as usual, BCCI takes a while to take cognizance of the fact that something new is coming. We don't really do well with, first of all, reacting to change and and adopting. Even one day cricket, we didn't do very well to begin with, and we were not taking it seriously. So that would have eventually happened. But I think the ODI World Cup would have been in better health.
Yeah.
And we ended up in this weird situation till 2007. The Champions Trophy and the One Day World Cup had distinct flavors. And because the World Cup was a much bigger expanded tournament, I think that is where the game is poorer now because of that. It's a black swan event in terms of, I think, for associate cricket more than everybody else. Everyone else would have still done something else, but associate cricket is in much poorer health because of that.
But what do you think would have happened to Bangladesh cricket?
Because Bangladesh really had a decent tournament anyway.
Bangladesh was chugging along, पता? In the sense, बांग्लादेश के साथ मुझे डर नहीं लगता उनके क्रिकेट का, क्योंकि even for
Base
to an extent Nepal, right? I know that in not now, but in 10 years or so, they will come up because they have this flourishing love. Bangladesh even more so than Nepal.
Yeah.
They already have this flourishing because, I mean, even look at Bangladesh now as a test team. They are not like supremely good right now, right? But it doesn't matter. To me, at least, I know people keep saying to me, it doesn't matter. To me, the only thing that matters is how much the popularity of that game is in that country.
Yeah.
And patronage for the game would still be the same because the culture has always been there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because Bangladesh might not have been a test playing nation, but they've had the history of India and Pakistan and test cricket, having hosted test cricket in the past and stuff like that. Bangladesh would have been decent, but the problem for some of the other associates which do not really have a cricketing tradition, say for a Dutch cricketer, pick any Dutch cricketer from 2007 and you suddenly have and 2011 also had a decently long till 15 we had this longish World Cup, right? But now look at what does a Dutch cricketer aspire towards. 4 years and you have two slots to play for,
Which is
okay, and
very difficult because
very
which is very difficult. And what does a Dutch cricketer aspire towards? Like, for a first of all, it's an associate nation. There isn't money to play for, so it's not a professional sport in that country. So the only thing that, say, even Ryan Tenderskata had a county career, but apart from that, take that away from him, why would Ryan Tenderskata then play for Netherlands over, say, someone like England? Because you have a shot at either playing cricket at the highest level, and you take that away, you take the dream away from a cricketer. And then why would the sport develop in that country? You have to give them a fair shot at playing something at the highest level. They might not go ahead and win the tournament,
Yeah.
but for the sport to remain viable, you have to give them something to aim at. And even a qualifying slot is something really big to aim at
I
for
mean,
these.
look at the last football World Cup. Iceland qualifying was bigger than like
the World Cup.
any team winning the World Cup. Yeah. For them, yes.
Yeah.
And that's how game grows, right?
Yeah.
In
No,
the
and
end.
see, even just two associate nations, if they come into the World Cup, they both go. They have to play like 8 huge teams. So they are really competing in a good, maybe like a skill match is happening in just one match, which is,
Yeah.
I mean, it would have been a different thing. Like if you give like I don't know, like Afghanistan, they are now much better, but or maybe Ireland versus Afghanistan.
To
Yeah.
ICC's credit, because we are always, I think this World Series cricket, the
League,
ODI
cricket
stuff,
league.
league, I think it is in their way, it is their workaround to make, like, because now, see,
Outside of the World Cup, they have something to
India is
aim
a
at.
bully. BCCI
Yeah.
is a bully,
Yeah.
right? So World Cup format cannot be changed. It will not be changed. It's because of BCCI, and it just is now. But outside of the World Cup, this still allows at least those 3-4 teams to play more games. And who knows,
Yeah.
like, I always not just the fact that BCCI BCCI makes money because Indians love cricket, but I don't even think that they have the mind to make money, because outside of India, if there is one country that has a lot of passion for cricket, it is Bangladesh.
Yeah.
If I were BCCI, honestly, I would make sure that there is a home and away series with.
For Bangladesh, yeah.
You cannot play Pakistan, I understand. Like right now, it's
Yeah.
political, so. But with Bangladesh, you can actually manufacture some sort of, however one-sided it is initially, you can actually manufacture some sort of rivalry, and even if not rivalry, you'll have eyeball. Bangladesh is a very
Yeah,
populated
yeah.
country.
And basically do what you are doing with Sri Lanka, what you were till a few years ago with Bangladesh.
Because
Yeah.
Those were
I
also
think
one-sided
BCCI.
almost. The eventual results were pretty much one-sided.
No, I
Those Sri
think
Lanka.
BCCI even
Sri
there,
Lanka, go on, sorry.
BCCI even there is very slow to react to this, right? BCCI still doesn't recognize the fact that Bangladesh probably is now a more competitive unit than Sri Lanka. It is still somewhere Indian public perception also in some sense is stuck in the 90s, the way we are. Sri Lanka is still in many people's heads a bigger team than
The
Yeah,
funny
yeah.
thing is, the funny thing is that we talk about Jasuria and De Silva and all of them. Sri Lanka is yet to win a test match in India.
in India.
Yeah.
They haven't yet won a test match in India, which is like I never noticed, honestly. Like, if you wouldn't tell me, I would assume that they have, because it just seems so natural that they would have, right?
At least one here or there, yeah.
We had a
At
glut
least
of
like late
draws.
90s to early 2000 May, they would have, like, you
Yeah.
feel that they would have, but they did. They've never won a test match in India.
Yeah.
Because we had a glut of draws in the 90s. Like, there were a lot of runs scored and we never won against them, but we also didn't lose a lot against them in Test cricket.
Yeah.
Sri Lanka has won test matches in South Africa, have won series in England.
But
I mean,
but
the last one was a freak.
but there are other freak results like this. Where Pakistan hadn't won a test series in West Indies till a couple of years back, 2017.
Yeah.
When we think of West Indies, we think of this terminal decline since when? Early
Mid
2000s,
90s,
right?
late 90s, I'd say.
Late
Late
90s to
90s,
early
yeah.
2000s. But we assume that they have lost pretty much everything. But neither Sri Lanka nor Pakistan have actually had won a test series till 2017.
Yeah.
And Bangladesh had won one, by the way,
Yeah, Bangladesh has won a series in West Indies,
in West Indies. So
but that's a asterisk उसके next.
weekend, second string West
हाँ,
Indies side था.
second, third string बोलूँगा मैं उसको.
Contractual dispute की वजह से.
Yeah.
Having said that, let's move on. Nishant, what's your what if?
So, I thought हम chronology समझाएंगे लोगों को, लेकिन anyway अब मेरा 99 वर्ल्ड कप से. So, what if Herschel Gibbs would have not dropped Steve Waugh in that league match? Well, technically he caught it. It was like a premature celebration.
Premature
Yes.
evacuation.
So what if that would have happened? So I think so. I don't know if I'll be able to get it right, but मैं थोड़ा छोटे से बड़ी चीज पे जाता हूँ. तो one obvious thing was, so South Africa had only somehow managed to lose one match in the league stages. That was against Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
Okay. And had so obviously, I mean, South Africa were defending 270 odd in that match.
Against Australia.
Australia were also like, they lost 3 wickets very early, and then Ponting and Steve Waugh took it from there, and Steve Waugh eventually ended up scoring his highest one-day score. And it was like, other than that one drop catch, and उसमें भी क्या है, like बंदे ने shot अच्छा मारा था. Gibbs was a good fielder. He kind of fielded it well and caught it, but it was an amazing innings. So one thing that would have happened was, had South Africa lost it, there was a good chance that Zimbabwe would have gone on into the semis, and they would have faced South Africa, having beaten them in the league stage.
Or even India would have had a chance at.
Even India would have had a chance, yes.
Because India and Australia were both exactly equal when they moved into the Super Sixes of that tournament.
Yeah. And Zimbabwe actually had additional points.
Which Zimbabwe had the most points from our group.
Zimbabwe had the more points going into that second stage.
Yeah. So, I mean, who knows? उस Indian team से मुझे इतनी उम्मीद थी नहीं वैसे कि even अगर.
But we still beat Pakistan.
Yeah.
Or the next game was against New Zealand which we would have had a shot.
Yeah.
Had we, लेकिन वो एंड में अपन वन साइडेड हारे न्यूजीलैंड से.
नहीं वन साइड हारे, बट मैं बोल रहा हूँ वो तो डेड रबर हो गया था अपने लिए. So there was also this element of there was nothing left in the tournament for us.
Yeah, actually.
That makes a huge difference, like in the way a game is played eventually.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is another what if.
My question is
no, but the second point. So this was like the theoretical scenarios ki, you know, maybe Zimbabwe would have had a chance to play a semi-final. Then if that wouldn't have happened, then would you? So whatever happened in that last ball of the 99 World Cup semi-final, but Klusner was amazing in that match.
Yeah.
तो वो नहीं देख पाते शायद. So that would have been, I mean, he was like what 10-12 ball में he scored like 30 odd and took it from nowhere. So that would have also, I mean, yeah, we would have missed it. Other than that, I don't know. मतलब, so Steve Waugh so Dravid was the highest scorer then, right? So maybe, and Steve Waugh wasn't far behind if I'm not wrong. I don't know exactly, but he also scored a 50 in the. So I mean, I'm just talking about so had Australia lost that match, and even in the semi-final, if it was still Australia-South Africa, Steve Waugh again scored pretty much like a match-saving 50 there. So yeah, I mean, sorry, I spoke wrong. So matlab, if Australia would have lost, then Steve Waugh wouldn't have been. Was he the man of the match in the semi-final, Steve Waugh? Probably.
No, Shane Warne was.
Oh right, Shane Warne was. So then they would have been not there. So matlab, yeah, if it was Zimbabwe or someone else, then South Africa might have actually gotten a chance to win the World Cup, and the biggest thing would have been like a Pakistan versus South Africa final, or maybe
I
New
think
Zealand versus South Africa final.
I think South Africa was one of the best teams in that tournament,
Yeah,
and I think Pakistan was as close to being one of the best teams in the tournament. They literally beat Australia in the league games.
yeah,
but
yeah,
lost to India and Bangladesh in the same
हाँ,
tournament.
वो टूर्नामेंट ऐसे बड़े भाई छोटे भाई वाला था ना.
yeah,
South Africa
yeah,
lost to
yeah,
Zimbabwe,
yeah.
Pakistan lost to Bangladesh. But I think so. My question is, would it have any ramifications? Let's say Australia that catch is caught. Australia doesn't make it to the semi-finals.
Oh
So
yeah, the
Australia,
biggest one was that's when it all started for Australia, right? I mean,
yeah,
But
exactly.
after
That's what I'm
99,
asking.
like 2003, 2007. I mean,
so
and
that
Would
even
it have
2000.
any ramifications into their test team? Because their
there are
test team
really
started winning after that only, right?
Yeah,
no, there are really juicy ramifications there, because you look at either side of it to understand that Shane Warne is really under threat. His position in the team is under threat going into the World Cup, because McGill has had a really good test
yeah.
series in West Indies. That classic series in West Indies where Lara
Last
pulls off
153.
that cheese, right? And us one day series mein Warne gets dropped. Uh, and McGill gets played as the primary spinner in that test match. There is one test where both Vaughan and McGill play, and
Yeah,
McGill outbowls Vaughan, and Vaughan
yeah.
gets dropped. And there is all this going on in the backdrop, and they lose this test series, and they lose. I think they also lost the one day series in West Indies. I am not very sure, or it was a 2-all draw, something like that, going into this World Cup. So Steve Waugh's place as a captain is under threat, and had Australia lost that World Cup and not gone through, Steve Waugh would have been dropped immediately as a
Yeah, yeah,
ODI captain for sure.
yeah,
Ponting probably might have gotten a chance much earlier.
yeah.
And what that would have meant for the test side is also probably Vaughan and Waugh would
That would
have
be
I
like
been.
a
think Mark
career-saving
Ponting
drop for.
wouldn't have been the captain right off the bat. I think Mark Waugh would have been the captain because Mark
But
Waugh wasn't dropped. Mark Waugh was still playing, and he was
but
the
Marco had this cloud of betting around him, right? Which is why Shane Warne could never become the Australian captain. So I think that those are some interesting ramifications, because probably what it meant was that Australia, even till that point, was a very vulnerable test side. The fact that they were lost in the West Indies then,
वो एशेज
and
जीत जाते थे 90s में, but they were
नहीं,
not
और एक साल
हर
पहले
जगह
तो
नहीं.
इंडिया में धुलाई हुआ था उनका,
हाँ,
लेस
yeah,
देन अ
yeah,
ईयर अगो,
yeah, yeah,
दैट
yeah,
डेजर्ट स्टॉर्म वाला जो इंडिया टूर
yeah.
था. So they were quite a vulnerable. They were not this impregnable Australian side till that point. Even till Hobart happens, which is why Hobart is such a big test match.
वो भी
the seven
umpire.
match one day series was drawn 3-3, and the 4-match test series was drawn 2-2.
2-2. Okay. So
But the-
that was not really a favorable result for Australia, at least not seen that way.
Yeah.
And Vaughan's revival happens in that World Cup, which is why McGill
I mean,
gets pushed
the
out and
final
Vaughan
to,
becomes.
final to, like, there was this famous story na, Sunil Gavaskar had said before starting, so he was one of the commentators in the final, and he had said they were just chatting with, like, for the pre-match presentation mein kuch ho raha hoga, not presentation but pre-match discussion mein, and Sunil Gavaskar says ki, I think Shane Warne will be today's man of the match, and whatever, like 4 for 20
And
33
And
jo bhi.
I also find this really interesting that see, the Australian side, I never really viewed them as a threat till after the 99 World Cup. मेरे लिए that was Australia was a more beat.
I viewed them as a threat, as in they were a good cricket team.
They were a
Yeah.
good side. हाँ.
But ऐसा नहीं कि हार ही
इनविंसिबल,
जाएंगे.
हाँ, मतलब एक होपलेसनेस जो पूरे
जो
2000s
साउथ
में
अफ्रीका के
आती थी
अगेंस्ट
उनके अगेंस्ट, या हाँ,
नहीं, नहीं, उस फेज में क्रिकेट वाचिंग फेज में मेरे लिए साउथ अफ्रीका वाज दिस अनबीटेबल साइड. बट ऑस्ट्रेलिया का ऐसा नहीं था कि ऑस्ट्रेलिया के साथ जीत नहीं सकते. एंड इमीडिएटली आफ्टर दिस वर्ल्ड कप यू हैव दिस पॉइंटलेस ट्राई सीरीज अगेन इन श्रीलंका, सिंगर कप या कुछ, या आकाई trophy, something like that,
the naam, हाँ, but
which is immediately after. You have India, Sri Lanka and Australia, and in that tournament you see Australia looks a different side, and you feel that okay, ये world champion side है, and it completely feels different
then from there on they can actually win it from anywhere. Yeah.
basically.
I have an interesting like from this what if scenario, something interesting. Imagine, so this happens. Australia doesn't make it to the semis. South Africa makes it to the semis. South Africa. So Pakistan plays New Zealand. Australia plays South Africa. South Africa plays
Zimbabwe,
Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe,
Right?
or
Let's say
maybe
Zimbabwe. South
yeah,
Africa plays Zimbabwe.
hmm.
South Africa beats Zimbabwe in
Yeah.
this. South Africa beats Zimbabwe. Pakistan beats New Zealand, and Pakistan faces South Africa in the final. And I'm just saying, let's say Pakistan ends up winning that game because Pakistan
Was a good team. Yeah, it could have happened.
had to
Yeah,
beat Australia. Now,
yeah,
now
and it was the finals though. Yeah.
Wasim Akram lifts the World Cup in England. One World Cup late, like 2 World Cups after Imran Khan
Imran Khan
does. The I'm just Wasim Akram
becomes the
developed.
PM of
No, not
Pakistan.
the PM, but how much would that have impacted Imran's stature in Pakistan in the next coming decades? And would that have any like butterfly effect into like him? Because so he
I know
makes
what you're saying. Huh?
his party comes into being in 96. Tehreek-e-Insaf is made in 96. Up until 2010s, like they are not a huge force. They're a very like their biggest one of their biggest wins came after like 2014 15 and then now, right? So that would have been very interesting how because I my assumption is Wasim Akram is playing cricket since 84 85.
World Championship के time से.
If 99 they win the World Cup and he's the captain, I don't think he plays anymore. He retires after that.
Probably, yeah.
And he retires as an equal to Imran Khan now. So, I mean, I don't know what happens, but that's also an interesting
Yeah.
thing to think about.
But one
Even-
thing for sure is for Pakistan cricket, it wouldn't have really changed much because Pakistan would have then gone on to lose a series against Bangladesh also. You never know with Pakistan. So.
Pakistan cricket, nothing changed. I don't
Yeah.
think
Overall, matlab, this would have had like
only ramification on Wasim as a
yeah.
human.
Yeah.
In fact,
Yeah, I mean, currently there's no match for Imran in Pakistan. Like, I mean, stature-wise.
That also partly has to do with the fact that Imran has this other bit of PR going for him, right? Oxford educated. Pakistan always has this thing for Oxford educated
English
captains.
बोलने वाले captain. इसे तो शान मसूद को captain बनाना यही तो है पूरा.
Educated subcontinental accent wala. So,
And I don't know if this is something.
But maybe that would have changed that.
उसको काफी ऑक्सफोर्ड एक्सेंट नहीं एजुकेटेड सबकॉन्टिनेंटल से भी ज्यादा एक्सेंट है उसका बट and I don't know if any one of us has it as our what if, but the 96 semi-final had India decided to bat instead of bowl against Sri Lanka. And,
Oh, yeah.
and imagine like in India Australia finals in Lahore. I feel
Imagine the whole Lahore cheering for India. Because
it
that
would have.
happened.
I still feel it would have happened in the
it would
90s.
have.
would it? I don't.
Yeah,
It would have probably.
Yeah.
And if
Especially,
Azhar
I mean,
ends up,
because if it's against the Goras, so it would have.
Yeah, or the thing is that I think that was mid 90s was the peak this Asian bloc solidarity in cricket.
तभी तो वर्ल्ड कप लाए वर्ल्ड कप
लाए,
है ना बट if Azhar ends up becoming a World Cup winning captain for India, then the
Oh
whole
my
like
God,
नहीं पर मैच फिक्सिंग वगैरह फिर बहुत लोग वो कर because
हाँ मत
you
लेके
can
जाओ
just-
दोस्त बहुत दर्द
you
हो
can not just point
दर्द ही
finger
दर्द मिलेगा
at a captain who's won you a World Cup, right?
जो कपिल के साथ probably हुआ.
जो कपिल के साथ प्रॉब्ली हुआ. I mean अजहर के साथ और भी एक दो फैक्टर्स थे, partly his name, but anyway, so that would have been an interesting what if like Azhar's stature in like from 96 to 99 he like again he debuts in 84, has already played 12-13 years. He's clearly not as fit as
yeah
he once was. But anyway, what if
but
and
then
moving on to
I mean
But sadly, पता है 98, 97, 98 was probably Azhar's most successful years as one-day captain. Post
98 was an amazing year for India.
in one-day cricket, even till the point that we lost in the semis in the Mini World Cup in 98, but we still beat Australia in that tournament.
So moving on, Aditya.
My moment is what if again features Bangladesh, who clearly have shaped international cricket in ways we don't give them credit for. So what if Bangladesh didn't beat England but England lost out in more conventional ways in the 2015 World Cup.
हाँ, मतलब
A
quarter
side led
में
by
जाके कुक था ना.
which is typical of England, right? They reach the quarters and like uninspiring performances. Cook captain hai. The side has Trott and Bell, and it still has Morgan and Butler, by the way, which we tend to forget. But the bowling attack is led by Broad and Anderson.
Butler 5 years ago. I mean, he's just
Yeah,
upcoming. So
Butler was even part of the 2013 Champions Trophy, but yeah, but he wasn't the Butler of today again.
yeah.
But the 2015 side wasn't a bad side; it was a good test side. But England lost to Bangladesh, and the fact that you have this whole thing of
The whole
the
ODI
entire
cricket
interest,
range. Yeah.
England never seemed to care really a lot about World Cups in general.
They
World
cared
Cup
about
defeats.
Ashes.
They cared
ODIs
about
in
Ashes
general.
and Test cricket in general.
ODI
Even a
बहुत
Test,
ही, yeah.
even a Test series loss in India probably mattered more to them than losing out on a World Cup.
Yeah.
But the fact that it ended in the way it did, the fact that they lost to Bangladesh of all sides, and the way they lost, it was a painful defeat.
Yeah.
It wasn't just, it was a close defeat, and they lose out in the league stages, and they get humiliated by New Zealand, and there is another game that they lost against Sri Lanka in the league stages, and it ends this way. Had they reached the quarters and say they faced South Africa and they lost out there and went home, and then played a test series at home against New Zealand,
If
and
they had reached the
Which
quarter, they
kind
would have
of
played
happened?
India, by the way.
Which kind of happened in 2011, right? They
11,
lost to Ireland.
which happened every other time.
But
It
2007
happened in
they reached
96. It happens all the time.
Even in 2019, they were almost. But that's a different matter. But yeah.
99 English people talk a lot more about because it was a home World Cup and they lost out in the league stages. But 2003, for example, again league stage exit. 2007 they reached the Super 8s, but nothing really. You don't even.
In 2007 में Super 8 में जाना, like Super 8 का idea ही इसलिए था कि Super 8 में जाएंगे. वो तो India और
Super
Pakistan
8 का idea was basically 2019 का league stage.
Yeah, basically that. Yeah.
वो भी नहीं हो पाया था ढंग से.
With a bonus stage, but you don't even register the fact that England played that World Cup. They were that lukewarm in that second stage. तो वैसे हारने से अच्छा है. तो मुझे लगता है कि कभी-कभी these sort of completely psyche changing moments जो होता है cricket में, I think those sort of defeats, it probably shook England in ways which a regular defeat wouldn't have.
I mean, to
Then
your
they-
point, Aditya, if they had beaten Bangladesh, I'm assuming in that game, they would have played India in the quarters. They would have lost. But now you can say that we played India in the quarters and we lost, so it's fine.
It's fine.
Fine.
Yeah.
And uska, everything is fine.
And it ended Cook's career, and it completely revamped the English ODI side. So, and also the fact that they were thrashed by New Zealand in that World Cup.
Yeah.
They were humiliated in like that game ended in an hour and a half.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. McCullum for 20 ball 50 या पता नहीं क्या
50, they get bowled out for 100. New Zealand comes in,
Just-
cleans them up in 7 overs and done. ये दोनों का combination, and the fact that then they started looking at the fact that okay, we'll have, and also that they had a home World Cup coming up,
Yeah.
so they couldn't afford a similar tournament again.
Revamp ही ऐसा हुआ कि now they have like two teams.
So,
like
yeah, so-
call it test match and one day separate teams. Yeah.
Yeah, so what happens generally is teams win World Cups, but very rarely, if you look at between 1992 and 2019, you had two sides which have changed the face of the sport in the way it is played, at least limited overs cricket. One is 96 Sri Lanka and the other is 2015 post 2015 England. These two sides have redefined the style of playing the sport. You can no longer, probably the other ramification of this is that the way India played its cricket between 2015 and 19, which is the conservative approach, would have been the standard norm for playing one day cricket,
Yeah.
had England not shaken it up
Yeah.
in those 4 years.
I mean, even Australia were not doing what England are doing. They
No,
were
even the peak Australia was winning World Cups because they were just bulldozing sides.
yeah,
They
yeah.
were not redefining the way the game is being.
Yeah.
They had a collection of all-time superstars, but they actually did what Sri Lanka was doing in a lot more efficient and mechanical fashion.
Yeah.
This changed English cricket. They move on in within a year. To their credit, it takes them less than a year to turn around English white ball cricket. They reach the finals of the World T20 in India. We tend to forget that they did that and won the World Cup. So whatever happened in 2019, the way the finals ended and stuff,
I mean,
that apart,
yeah,
they
but-
deserved. They were the best white ball side
But
in
if they
the last 4
wouldn't have
years.
changed their approach, then we probably wouldn't have seen the best one day ever.
So, with that said, we can do one more what if.
So are we giving Bangladesh enough credit? That is.
We are not giving Bangladesh enough credit, but are Bangladesh giving Bangladesh enough credit?
What if
Bangladesh-
Mustafizur would have completed that run where he got run out against Dhoni? Well, actually, it would have been a super over, so who knows?
Mushfiqur, right?
How much? No, I mean, Mustafizur was the one who got run out.
Last
2016 World Cup. But again, that would have meant it's a super over, so still, you never know who would have won. But
India Bangladesh have played. I'm saying that series that I'm talking about, like having an like every 2 years having an away and home 3 test, 5 1 day, 3 test, 3 1 day, 3 T20 series. It will be
commercial
blockbuster.
to definitely
Maitri
success
series.
होगा, हाँ.
My-
Commercially, it will definitely be a success. Because मतलब, the best thing is that whether you play India or Bangladesh, you don't have to worry about the time zone, which I think is a huge advantage. Like prime time पे matches हो सकते हैं.
जो पाकिस्तान के साथ भी
जयपुर
था.
के स्टेडियम का नाम क्या है?
Yeah.
कहाँ पे?
सवाई मानसिंह.
सवाई मानसिंह.
तो अपन वहां पे एक टेस्ट मैच कराएंगे और उस सीरीज का नाम रख देंगे हसीना मान जाएगी. कैसा रहा?
अंकल जोक.
मेरा फंदा कहाँ गया?
तो anyway, do you guys want to quickly talk about 96 World Cup semi-final या कुछ
एक और है मेरे पास भी, बट ठीक है वो कभी और की.
नहीं बोल दे, तू बोल दे क्या शर्मा हो.
मेरा ये था कि what if the Asian Test Championship continued to live?
Why was it shelved? I've forgotten. Why was it shelved?
Because Kargil happened and India didn't send a side in 2000. 2 editions of that happened.
But then we started playing them again in 2003, 2004, right?
But the tournament
तब
never.
वो भूल गए.
वो
भूल गया,
भूल
वो
गए.
हो गया वो.
Actually हुआ कि-
फाइनल चूहे खा गए थे उसकी.
99 में जब हुआ, 2000 में जब रिपीट होना था तो हम लोगों ने साइड नहीं भेजा 2000 में. बट हम लोग एशियन वनडे एशिया कप खेल रहे थे वनडे वाला.
Exactly. तो
Yeah.
क्या मतलब
See,
या तो
again, this also ties into the fact कि maybe if we were playing more in Asia, maybe Yuvraj and Kaif and would have had more test matches. I don't like, it would have.
बट मेरा व्हाट इफ था कि वो अगर टूर्नामेंट जिंदा रहता, इमेजिन लाइक द आइडिया ऑफ एन एशियन टेस्ट चैंपियनशिप नाउ. इट वुड बी क्वाइट अ tournament to actually watch. Like the quality of
don't
cricket
think
might
so,
be
man.
decent.
now India will just thrash
India will
everyone.
steamroll in
None of the
India,
test-
but you'll still have.
I think India and Pakistan might be able to give some fight.
Yeah, Pakistan or even Bangladesh, अगर on a good day.
Test match में I doubt it.
We have
क्योंकि ultimately अब क्या हो गया, the thing that has changed is that India at home, or if I can say in the subcontinent, is as good in their pace department as they're in their spin department.
So
Batting
it's an
तो है.
all-round. As an
Exactly.
all-round attack, I don't think any other attack is good in India.
Yeah. वो मतलब वही है
As
ना कि
good.
even we like to hate on BCCI and India bullying the world cricket in general, but the fact is कि ये test team solid है. Like it
मतलब
deserves to be number one.
The thing is कि look at Bangladesh, Sri Lanka playing each other. They play like competitive test cricket against each other, right?
Each other.
When India plays Bangladesh or India plays Sri Lanka, India is thrashing them like दो दिन में test चला रहा है, right? Now look at Sri Lanka, because Bangladesh is also not playing Pakistan a lot. But Sri Lanka and Pakistan are playing very competitively. In fact, Sri Lanka beat Pakistan in Sri Lanka.
In Sri Lanka.
Right? But still, so like in a way,
इनफैक्ट यार श्रीलंका तो ऑस्ट्रेलिया को भी श्रीलंका में हराया था. साउथ अफ्रीका, ऑस्ट्रेलिया, एवरीबॉडी लॉस्ट इन श्रीलंका इवन विद द श्रीलंकन साइड.
मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि a lot of these players like Kohli and all not playing a test, like in the last 4-5 years, had we been playing tests against Pakistan, there would have been occasions where India would have beaten Pakistan in a test match in 2 days, 2.5 days, trust me.
Yeah, subcontinent में तो definitely.
काफी ज्यादा रब करने का मौका आपको मिलता।
बट इस पाकिस्तान साइड के साथ मुझे थोड़ा सा होप है, एटलीस्ट द वे इट इज शेपिंग अप।
हाँ अभी अभी यश
अभी
ये
वाला
शाहीन और ये नए लोगों के बाद,
हाँ हाँ हाँ।
बट
मिसबा वाले साइड का आई डोंट थिंक वो मिसबा वाला साइड वुड हैव स्टूड अ चांस अगेंस्ट
इवन
इंडिया।
Really?
अर्ली
was
अजहर अली, आई एम
no
सेइंग
Misbah wala side.
Misbah and Yunus would have fought, but वो bowling attack I don't think would have had a shot at getting 20 wickets against.
I mean, they
ये
won in
current side
India.
में एटलीस्ट वेराइटी है बस। बट दैट
कह
अपार्ट 96 सेमीफाइनल क्या बोल रहा था?
15-16 में 15 हाँ वो पहले 2015-16 में पाकिस्तान like Misbah go 16 में ही ना Azhar Ali becomes captain right after Misbah retired. That team, imagine that team playing a series against even the 16-17 का India team. Oh my God, they would have been like it would have been challenging for them. हालांकि they did better in England than we did last series, not this series but last.
Which is the interesting thing in cricket is that not all keys unlock all locks ना। तो होता यह है कि certain teams do well. There is something about West Indies which England can never crack.
Yeah.
Even in a कोई भी सीरीज उठा लो पिछले 10-12 साल में, इवन 2005 से England end up losing to the West Indies somehow, even when other teams are thrashing them. So there is something in cricket which is like, which needs a deeper introspection. जो राका को बंद करने के लिए अगर एक ही तरीका होता था
राका क्या भाई तो मैच राका का मैंने सोचा। एनीवे तो 96 की वैसे बात करी अपन ने, बट थोड़ा बहुत कुछ थॉट्स और 96 में आई मीन और कुछ अजहर का ही होता पर्सनल रैमिफिकेशन और
तेंदुलकर का स्टारडम वुड हैव वो कैटअपल्ट जो 98 में हुआ
वो 96 में हो जाता,
वो
हो चुका था राइट, because yeah, because he had to go and like
the only thing that would have happened is कि राहुल और सौरव का करियर शुरू होने में और टाइम लगता।
Kamli would have been around for much longer.
So 50-50. I mean, Ganguly को time लग जाता है, it's fine.
एक वर्ल्ड कप विनिंग साइड हो जाता है ना, तो everybody in the squad benefits.
द्रविड़ ने ओडीआई डेब्यू से पहले ही कर लिया था।
No, that's what I'm saying.
तुरंत बात किया था।
I'm fine with delaying Ganguly's entry, but not Dravid's entry. That's what I'm saying.
यार गांगुली का एंट्री वाज अ मोर सुपरस्टार एंट्री।
एक्चुअली गांगुली का 96 से 2000 का जो करियर है, अगर गांगुली 2000 में रिटायर हो जाता ना, लेट्स से गांगुली को चोट लग गया गांगुली, तो ही वुड हैव बीन रिमेंबर्ड एज वन ऑफ दोस।
गांगुली probably was as good a one day batsman as Sachin in those 4 years.
Better. So
yeah, probably.
96 to 2000 when Sachin had a great 98. If you compare their careers, Ganguly has scored more runs and more hundreds. It's right after 2000 that he drops off.
98 में हालांकि सबने रन बनाया।
I somehow remember a lot of one days where I don't remember कि उसमें सचिन खेल रहा था या where he was batting, but Ganguly in some of those big chases that we were talking about,
Dhaka,
he has that he has I'm not saying he match winning hundreds, but he provided those like 15 ball 30s in fact a couple of times like,
Dhaka and NatWest में भी
yeah he was
NatWest का वो जो फाइनल गेम है, जो मेन गेम, जो फाइनल मैच, by that he's done though.
हुआ क्या पता है 2001 में you remember there was a tour to South Africa in 2001 when he becomes first tour गांगुली का as a captain to South Africa where Mike Dennis happened. उसके पहले एक वनडे सीरीज हुआ था जहाँ पे एक मैच जीते भी थे हम साउथ अफ्रीका के खिलाफ, तो वो रेयरली जीतते थे तो याद रहता है। तो गांगुली का वहाँ पे गेम ना बहुत अजीब सा हो गया था, आंद्रे नेल को वो रूम देके ऑफसाइड में स्लैम करने लगा।
वही मैं कह रहा हूँ, और वो नेटवेस्ट में भी हो, तो बेसिकली गांगुली that was his career then afterward वो उसका गेम वही हो गया। Basically he was found out at some point around that time. South Africa found him out and everybody found him out, and then like even that NatWest game that we talk about where they gave a decent opening, it's a lot about him just taking these chances, playing these short pitches,
और Lords का shorter square boundary, so
I don't know why we always end up doing this, but I think this is the point that where we can wrap.
एक और fascinating what if है, but वो अगले एपिसोड के लिए
अपन what if करते हैं।
जॉर्ज आर मार्टिन टाइप ने वो छोड़ दिया है, टाइम